Hello and welcome to Pardon My Disruption. I'm Alan Berkson. I'm the Director of Community Outreach for Freshdesk, and I'm here, as always, but with Dr. Disruptive, Jonathan Yarmis.
And as always, Alan, for at least the second month in a row, is joining us straight off a red eye. I admire your commitment.
I just flew in from San Francisco, and boy, are my arms tired. And in fact, I'm wearing the hat. We're both Mets fans. Most people know that if you follow us on Twitter. And as a Met fan, you need to have a team to root for.
After
June. You need a postseason team. So Jill Soley, who's the VP of Marketing for Freshdesk, kindly sent me this hat, and I'm supposed to wear it. But they've been winning since I've worn it, so now I can't take it off.
That's, we're both secondarily then Giants fans. As I mentioned to Alan earlier, my affiliation to the Giants, my grandfather, who passed away 3 years before I was born, but actually died at the Polo Grounds opening day, the 1952 Giants baseball season, had a heart attack at the ballpark. As I understand it, it's the exact right place for him to die. So I have a great close affinity to the Giants, going back from when I was -3.
Exactly. So I flew in from San Francisco. I was there for Dreamforce, which is Mark Benioff's annual gala. 145,000 people.
And millions watching online as well.
It's unbelievable. Well, he tries to compete with Ellison, because Oracle Open World was the week before.
Yeah, and half the size.
Yeah. No, it's
physically and Larry compared to Mark. Yeah.
No, and it's there were some announcements there, and when did Salesforce start? It's been 15 years.
Something in that range.
And they were originally considered a disruptive company, and we've been talking about what does disruption mean. I think, and what is the term from Princess Bride? I do not think that word means what you think it means. There were some new announcements. I think you were talking about one of them, the Wave, the analytics cloud, Wave.
And analytics is such an interesting field these days, because we talk about big data, and I look at big data, and I've railed against big data as an advance forward for a number of years now. I grew up, I had a high school job working around the corner from here at 1133 Westchester Avenue. It was IBM's data processing division back in the mid-1970s. It might have even been early 1970s.
When you had an MIS department.
Yes, okay. Yes. No, and an MIS director.
Right.
Yes. And back then we did data processing, and there was this hierarchy of value from data to information to knowledge to wisdom. And we've spent the intervening, whatever it is, 40-something years moving up the value chain, only to reach now, when we come to 2014, and the big advance is more data. Rarely in my mind is the answer to any business problem, we need more data. In fact, what we need are more insights, more real-time ability to evaluate that data. And hence, the analytics field is really big. And I think the opportunity comes that a few years ago, analytics was the bailiwick of analytics professionals. In fact, we all now need to have available to us a rich set of analytics tools so that we can do our own analysis and value mining of the data, and we can drive this pervasively through the organization. And that's been an overriding thing that's been driving the business intelligence field for the last couple of years, moving from the data scientist to the casual end user. And that's why I think the Salesforce introduction is so interesting and timely.
It continues to be a consumerization of the different types of technology, consumerization of CRM, consumerization of analytics.
By the way, that's another thing. Let me rail against consumerization, because that's an obvious one. Right. We're consumerizing everything, right. But what we're having a hard time with is the corollary of that, or the flip side, or the inverse, the ITization of users. We're giving them all of this power and no responsibility, no understanding of exactly what it is they're assuming responsibility for. And that's why we have some of these terrible security breaches, because we've given them all of the freedom and none of the responsibility and understanding.
The knowledge. Exactly.
Yeah. So, you know, and some of it may not even be the knowledge. It's how do we make it so they can't get themselves into trouble? So, you know, they've seized control, but with it have made some really terrible platform decision choices and operational and behavioral choices. But how do we give them the authority and responsibility with a set of capable tools? And I think that's an interesting tension, and one, you know, why Salesforce is in the game here. They're going, I'm sure, going to try and make the pitch. You know, we give you a robust set of tools. We're empowering you, end user.
Right.
But oh, by the way, IT organization, you can like this because we understand and we deliver in a responsible fashion.
Right. Before we continue, I just want to shout out to the Stanford Innovation Center, who's our host. And they give us a space to do this, and we've got a crowd here.
Yay, crowd.
All right. The thing for me about data also is, just because you have information doesn't mean it has value and doesn't mean it can correlate. You've got so many disparate systems that you have dirty data. You have data that doesn't. So you have somebody, you can give somebody all the power in the world with Wave to be able to create a report, but if it's not good data, they're not even. How do you get insights?
Yes.
What is the old saying is garbage in, garbage out.
Yes, and never has that been more true.
And I think that's the next. There's an opportunity.
Yeah.
For data cleansing, data. I don't know.
It's been an opportunity forever. The holy grail of one version of the truth.
But I think it's more urgent, more relevant now than it's ever been.
Yes, I would agree with that. And the only observation I would make is we're likely to get further away from that than closer in the near term.
So, off to our favorite whipping boy. In your favorite product, Apple. So we're a month in from, I don't know. I have an iPhone 5, and if my 4S hadn't died, I'd still have a 4S.
It's nice to have a Luddite next to me.
No, but
you probably still want the Motorola StarTech.
No, that was a good phone. The StarTech.
It was a good phone.
That was the good phone. No, but it's about what has Apple done to make me, they haven't done something to make me want to get another phone. Okay, it's a little bigger.
Yeah, don't just downplay the fact that it's a little bigger. You know, I've got, you know, the Galaxy 4 rather, and I'm thinking my next device within the next month may well be the Note 4 or the new Google Nexus device that they announced this week. You know, where it's the phablet. And
or even the BlackBerry passport. Whatever.
Yeah. Hey,
they're bringing sexy back to mobile devices. That's their campaign.
They just announced this morning that demand exceeded supply. 14 people wanted one, and they only made 12. Yeah, no lines in front of the BlackBerry store.
Right.
But anyhow, I mean, let's on the one hand, Apple devotees will say these things have been selling really well. It's selling better than any new product introduction they've had. I would sit there and say, yeah, if you're 2 years late to a market and then finally introduce the product, that's called pent-up demand. So I think the bigger screen form factors are in fact a growing trend. I saw a statistic the other day that says these devices are going, somebody's forecast in the next year or two are going to represent a third or more of the market. And I think it's a growing recognition. As we do more sophisticated things on these devices, screen real estate is an issue. And the larger form factor, as long as it's still pocketable and doesn't bend, are in fact a growing trend. This was great when we did a couple of things, texting and small data, but I think the larger form factor.
But I think it also has to do with the fact that what's your primary computing device?
I don't believe there is such a thing.
Well, but I think that what they used to be
Yes, there used to
There
be.
used to be that
Yes.
a desktop was a primary computing device, and then a laptop was a secondary, but
You know how to push my buttons. The very first, I worked at Gartner. I started in June of 1987. The very first research note I wrote 27 years ago was the single converged device will never exist. And I believed it then, and I believe it now. And look at me, you know.
right.
I've got the tablet, I've got the cell phone, I've got the smartwatch, I've got the laptop at home. I'm getting today a new desktop computer because I occasionally like an even bigger screen form factor.
Right.
You know, and with the cloud, you know, all of these things operate seamlessly. You know, so I think the notion of the single device is in fact going away, even as we do more and more things on these devices. You know, there's a time when I want complete portability. There's a time when I want pocketability. There's a time when I want, you know, high mobility with a reasonable enough screen to see some things, especially on my aged eyes. There are times, you know, I was just working on, you know, amazingly enough, a 472-row spreadsheet where I wanted to compare things, and having a 23-inch screen comes in really handy, or multiple screens. So I think we're moving toward a world of increased diversity of devices.
Well, that's I mean, wearables, right?
Mm-hmm.
Will.i.am was at Dreamforce announcing his wearable device.
Yes. And so, you know, I mean, that's another thing when we talk about, you know, Apple's introductions of a month ago, and I was disappointed then and remain disappointed. You know, my observation was I still wear my Samsung Gear watch, and I'm happy to wear it and comfortable to wear it. And I thought Apple was going to introduce something that showed they had figured it out, that was going to make me throw this away because I'd be embarrassed to wear it, because if I did, I'd be the object of scorn. You know, and they didn't do anything like that. You know, so you know, I think, you know, the wearable space, and that's probably a subject for another day.
So,
you know, it's interesting and important, but we're still early stages.
So talk about the non-disruptors. So Microsoft buys Minecraft.
Yeah.
And gamers all around the globe groan because they're thinking, all right, so I guess we're done with Minecraft.
Yeah. You know, and you know, what always amazes me is these companies you may not have heard of before they were acquired, get acquired for billions of dollars. And
what was the, it was $2 billion, right?
Yeah, billions and billions. Yeah. But, you know, some of it is, you know, gaming, as we've seen, is an ephemeral success. You know, that yesterday's gaming hot company is today's stock market disaster, and tomorrow's, you know, where did they go kind of candidate. And thus, I think Microsoft was looking at this as more than just a gaming acquisition. You know, that they're viewing this as a collaborative social learning platform.
Call of Duty just launched, announced that they're launching communities.
Yeah.
For Call of Duty. I mean, there's that whole sense that it's more than just you sitting playing Pong.
Right. Boy, you're dating yourself too.
Come on, who's played Pong?
Yeah.
There we go. We got all the hands up. All right. That gives you an idea of our crowd.
You know, so I think from that perspective, as a platform, and again, you know, the gaming consoles are still an interesting space. What is their role in the living room? You know, what is Microsoft? Because this is one that's flipped. For a while, Xbox was the hot device.
Right.
You know, Sony has clearly taken over leadership in that space now. So Microsoft needs to do something to enhance the attractiveness.
So now I'm going to put on your analyst hat for a minute, right? So the race,
looks like a giant sign.
No, you're going to put on your analyst hat.
Yeah.
The race in gaming was always about the technology. It was always about faster, better pixels, better action. Are we seeing a shift? Is this what this is?
I wouldn't say a shift, because it's still going to be that. You know, we've got a long way to go when you start thinking about, you know, the holy grail immersive 3D kinds of games, that there's a whole lot of capability yet to be exploited. But I think we're also recognizing that gaming isn't the only thing that gets done with these platforms, that gaming has some inherently social characteristics, that there are other things you can do with the gaming platforms. And we're still, that whole notion of, you know, how does the living room fit into the experience is something nobody's come close to cracking the code on that.
Right, and look, HBO announcing their streaming service. And
right.
So you have Netflix, and so there's a lot of different players trying to figure out how do I own that entertainment dollar? How do I? It's been a monopoly by the cable companies, but that's. I mean, they have a weird relationship, but they're also
selling the internet access.
They're selling internet access.
Yeah, yeah. So don't cry for the cable. So I mean, every dollar that they lose from the cable subscription services, and I think some of that may be overstated, will actually be gained because they'll probably up the prices of internet access because there's not a lot of competition in that space. So,
but the the fight for the share of right now, I still don't think that at any time I can't stream anything I want at any time. There's still. First, we have to go find it because maybe it's on Netflix or maybe it's on Amazon or maybe it's on HBO.
The experience is awful. I mean, it's one of those things. We're reasonably technically savvy and are willing to invest lots of time and attention for doing these things. And if we find it a horrible experience, we always use the threshold of what would our parents do, and my mother's just not going to do that. Right. So we've got a ways. Some of it, of course, is the kids growing up, are much more used to doing these kinds of things. But I think even they would acknowledge that the integration and multiple disparate platforms they have to deal with are troublesome. And it's one of those things. I'll bet you, if you asked 100 kids, only 2 of them would say it's a problem. But the moment we identify, the best solutions are ones that are solutions to problems you didn't know you had until somebody solved the problem.
Right.
And this, I think, is one of those. When somebody gets this right, we'll go, wow, that's what it should have been all along, and they'll have a great opportunity.
So,
but
so,
boy,
30,
we're not
so
there.
30 seconds, who's close?
No, but I mean, who's playing here?
Yeah.
I mean, I think Google and Apple are clearly the large players here. Microsoft, has some opportunities with Xbox, and they in many ways have more of the pieces than anyone else.
And the cable companies,
or
are they just they're playing catch up, or they're waiting to see what happens?
Don't get me going on the cable
companies.
Yeah, I like them. Only slightly more than I like the wireless carrier. So
we did a survey at Dreamforce where we asked people which industry they thought gave the worst customer service, and it was close. We're going to announce the results, but cable was
shockers.
Yeah.
And as an aside, I always thought that was brilliant. In the early days of Twitter, Comcast was actually a very active customer service player on Twitter.
Sure.
And everybody
cares. Yeah. That was what's his name? Frank Eliason.
Yeah. And everybody always said, wow, look at the great job Comcast is doing. Of course, the great job they were doing was for 27 people. The rest of the millions of subscribers had a horrible experience, but 27 people said, wow, Comcast was really responsive to me, as if somehow they had moved the needle. That they were very shrewd, and I don't want to overstate how they did a nice job and have worked hard at being responsive across channels.
And they've also set some standards for how it can be done, but it's really just a microcosm.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about one of your favorite large companies who's split in 2.
HP.
HP.
Oh, hold on.
Would you like to ask a question?
Yes.
Sure.
The question about gaming and the currency space within gaming. Warcraft trades its own kind of currency, so people do work out and buy it. But now with the advent of cryptocurrencies and the whole sort of the coin space, do you see that as a growth area within the gaming system?
Yeah, the general question is, gaming has had all of these currencies whereby, people can buy things in world.
World of Warcraft is a perfect example.
Yeah, and how is that going to evolve given things like Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and I'd add into that Apple Pay and a PayPal separated from.
They've got dollars.
They're
it's created by a rule. So World of Warcraft can't just spew it out or inflate it and give it to friends.
Yeah.
It's created by a rule, and now it can kind of, through its economic growth or decline, prove out whether the game is really becoming more and more successful or less and less successful.
Yeah, I think the whole cryptocurrency and payments space is one that I think, when we look at things that are truly disruptive and are going to change dramatically in the next 5 years, especially because there's pent-up demand, this is one of those areas that I think is the case. I remember, even as recently as a few years ago, dealing with some people where, I had a title that involved disruption in the analyst space, and I went to collaborate with our financial services brethren about disruption in the financial services space. And their answer was basically, no, there's too much regulation, too many entrenched players. It's not going to happen, not in our lifetime, and I walked away going, wow, I guess they are representative of the ostrich customer base who doesn't want to believe that there's change coming. I believe there's significant change coming. Some of the things that are going on in gaming are early manifestations of that. There was a period of time, I remember when Second Life, Linden dollars was, I believe, the 8th largest currency in the world, which is kind of amazing on the one hand, but I think indicative of where we're heading. So I think the whole currency and payments space is really going to be interesting in the next couple of years, as there are so many different approaches that are going to be fighting. You look at
government-backed currencies is a standard that's been around forever, and it's a monopoly.
Right,
and that's always ripe for some sort of disruption.
Yeah, especially because when you look at what's going on, with those government-backed currencies these days, and the requirements of, the perversion, if you will, of market forces and things that are going on, the currencies, the traditional government-backed currencies, are having their own issues independent of the alternatives that would drive interest in an alternative.
Right.
So the fact that they're having problems.
It's about trust. We've talked about that in other aspects of, social currency, but physical currency, trust is still there. That's what there's nothing backing up a dollar. It's the faith and trust of the U.S. government.
Yeah, but at the same time, that's something you can trust in. I think when you look at some of the perturbations to hit the Bitcoin marketplaces, people go in and out of business as troves get discovered. Where people don't understand. The question of, is Bitcoin a currency or a commodity, is one that I don't know that we've answered yet, and it may well be that with market-driven economies, the answer is yes to both, and we're going to have a new world where the line between a currency and a commodity is blurred. Interesting space.
Great question.
I just wanted to ask, within the concept, within the game world, it's a bigger topic from that.
Yeah,
I wonder if the World of Warcraft phenomenon was spreading in the COD and Assassin's Creed into other environments, or is it just kind of?
Yeah. Well, I think the question is, is the World of Warcraft kind of phenomenon, spreading into other games, and I think the short answer is yes, because they all realize what a lucrative opportunity is. It's also one of those things where, at some point, the demand for a common currency across multiple platforms, starts to put some tension. The game companies themselves want a proprietary solution. The consumer at some level wants a cross-platform standard. and we end up in a world where proprietary standards exist, but at some point, I think, and we're still, I think, several years away from that, but at some point the cross-platform standards will drive out most of the proprietary platforms.
Great. So, all right, your favorite enterprise technology company,
HP. Yeah.
They did something.
Yeah, after firing the previous, prior CEO, Leo Apotheker, for suggesting that maybe the company would be better off splitting in two. Horrors, shoot the man. Here we are several years later, and their great strategy is, let's split up into two companies.
When did we do that thing in the park with Fred? That's when we were talking about.
Yeah.
That had to be like 2.5 years ago, right?
Oh, at least, maybe more. HP is the gift that keeps on giving. Between HP and Yahoo, if you look at the number of times I've been quoted in the USA Today, talking about HP upheavals and Yahoo management changes and board dysfunction, I could have made a career out of just those two companies. You look at the HP solution, and if you were to ask, what are the problems with HP? Nowhere do I think, gee, let's split them into two companies solves the problem. But let me try and make the argument.
Well, why don't you explain first what the split was?
Well, what the split was is, HP is one of the few companies that actually still tries to sell PCs.
Aren't they still the largest PC manufacturer in the world?
Yeah, probably. If not close, but the truth of the matter is that they didn't really make so much money selling PCs or printers. They made money selling ink. Yeah. Which is remarkable. That's another pet peeve. Why would anybody in the world ever buy replacement ink cartridges? Because you can frequently get a new printer for the price of replacing your ink cartridges. But that aside, they're going to take this boat anchor of a PC company, split it off, and leave the enterprise piece selling cloud and security and networking and services and all the other stuff as another company. On the one hand, this is stock market, financial engineering. Let's spew the words, liberate shareholder value and so on. But let me try and make a case why this is a good thing. Okay. And the case would be, imagine you're sitting in an HP high-level meeting, and you've got these two businesses, and somebody says, this cloud thing is really important. We've got to go embrace the cloud. And somebody else is going, but servers are my highest margin business. You can't push the cloud because then people will need fewer servers and you'll hurt our business. And you end up with something where it compromised their cloud embrace and hurt their ability to go self-service. Right. So maybe by liberating the two, you get a newly invigorated hardware company that can go just say, hey, whoever needs hardware, we're your best provider. We've got great stuff. We're going to go whole hog and make these the best possible thing. And the enterprise company can now go be a real cloud company.
This kind of mirrors IBM a little bit. Is that what they're trying to do, or that's just the appearance?
No,
IBM got rid of their PC division to focus on services, and now IBM is a cloud company. That's their messaging.
Yeah, but I think IBM was more of a near-death, affirmative, market vision leading, we've got to do something, let's go out and do it, where HP's had this agglomeration of things, and instead of being an affirmative strategy, it's like, okay, we've got these two pieces that don't seem to fit together well. We've never been able to figure out the services and cloud stuff, but maybe if we make them their own company, that somehow will make us smarter and more market responsive. So I don't believe that this solves their problems. IBM made a fundamental change in this business.
What does this mean for Dell and the other PC manufacturers? What's the impact?
Not much. I mean, does this make HP a newly invigorated, PC player? The PC business still is a sucky business. I mean, margins are low. HP has many of the same problems Dell has had with regards to, oops, we missed mobility. Yeah,
Right.
and if we're talking about phablets being the growing trend and so on, and more people will use those devices, we'll see if a newly focused company can go correct the errors of their ways. But to some extent, the management of the enterprise company, the CEO is still Meg Whitman. The chairman of the board of the PC company is still Meg Whitman. This has not been a let's clean house and reorient. It's let's cleave these two companies apart and hope that 1 + 1 is somehow greater than 2 and not less than 2. I try to make the positive case, but it's hard to do.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is it's a terrible idea, and 10 it's a great idea.
It's not a terrible idea. I mean, the analyst in me hates doing this, but let me give it a 5. It's like, it's neither good nor bad. It just is.
Yeah.
Are people too trusting?
The question.
And what can be done about it? Are people just going to have to go Jennifer Lawrence to get everything done? Or
Well, we have one of our
build protections, cryptography?
right. So what the question is: are people too trusting of the crowd? And we have a
Cloud.
The
But the crowd is also
that's also another one, of the cloud.
Yeah.
We actually have a recurring feature on part of my disruption. We talk about our security update. So that's actually a good segue. We can talk about the fact that pretty much you have to assume every major company has had a breach, whether or not they've admitted to it.
Yes, and if not, they will. Are people too trusting of the cloud? The short.
Is it trustworthy?
Yeah.
Is the question. Many think it is. I don't.
Yeah, or is it trustworthy? Are people too? I mean, I think that in some ways that almost may be. Let me rephrase the question and say, is the cloud architecture inevitably going to be the one we live with? Or are security concerns going to be so considerable that we're going to go back to some forms of proprietary and private solutions?
Cryptographically protected systems.
Yeah, well, and I think the short answer is, we've bet on the cloud, but saying we've bet on the cloud doesn't mean that we've got this wide open platform. And let me kind of, one of the things, a recurring theme I think of every computing advance has been, early on we do these things that attempt to overreach the capabilities of a platform. So we introduce something new that's going to replace everything that came before it. That doesn't work. We then go back to something that is kind of a least common denominator platform that says, okay, it doesn't have all of the advanced functionality that I really wanted in a new platform, but it's something accessible to everybody. We then embrace that new platform and then discover, but guess what? It's got all of these incredible holes that I needed, that the last generation platform had, that my early failed initiatives had. But now that I've deployed this platform so broadly and there's no turning back, I need to fill in the gaps. And I think that's where we are with regards to the cloud. We've made this irreversible bet largely that the cloud's the platform we're heading on. And I think it's almost to a point where it's a meaningless term, because we're going to have public clouds, we're going to have private clouds that have some of the more inherently private characteristics of proprietary closed networks. We're going to have hybrid as a dominant model where we've got some of each. And we're now in this incredible race for how do we make these platforms more secure from both the back-end architecture, how do we make them more resistant to intrusion, And at the same time, the client devices, when I talked earlier about the ITization of consumers, that if all of the breaches are coming in because of, I mean, some of them are bad enterprise practices, some of them are bad consumer practices.
Right.
How are we going to fix both of those things? And I think we're there. I'm trying to remember the name of the platform, but was it twofactor.com or something like that? If you don't have two-factor authentication turned on every platform for which you can, you're asking for trouble. I mean,
that's become an issue because of so many people have had their accounts compromised and their passwords compromised. So the market is pushing you towards more security from that perspective, and the same thing with privacy, and the same thing with private communications in terms of the bugs that have happened in Apache and stuff, which have allowed you to capture, which we've talked about here. So it's not that cloud is necessarily going to, but the holes are going to become more apparent that we have to fill them. That the two-factor authentication means that I can't just willy-nilly have used the right password, and it's easy because I can guess it because it's password 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, let's make it real clear that username and password as an authentication approach is the wrong long-term approach. We need to replace it with some other things that may include bioidentification or things like that, that include two-factor or other things that are more trustworthy than username and password, because username and password ultimately is an unreliable approach.
And the other piece to that is people don't realize that the majority of the communications that's going on, I could put a sniffer on a network and I could capture a tremendous amount of information about people, but none of it is encrypted. It's all, a lot of it is going out as free text. And so that's another level of innovation that has to happen in terms of making more personal, privacy is not the right word.
Protection.
Protection in terms of
confidentiality.
Protecting the confidentiality of the communication.
And confidentiality, that's another thing. I don't know if we want to get into, I think which of the disposable platforms, supposedly disposable platforms, I was reading about just this morning, lo and behold, guess what? They're not really disposing of things. They're tracking and selling and storing, and I think this notion of protection and confidentiality and openness, there are going to be some disruptions. It's an interesting time in this world, but username and password is a bad approach, and we don't have good alternatives yet.
So I talked about crowd accidentally. I know when I was in San Francisco, I Ubered, because it's now a verb. I Ubered at least a half a dozen times. But now that it's becoming, just like with any new technology or new innovation, as it becomes more prevalent, the holes become more apparent and the challenges become more apparent. Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, there's been some interesting things.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you say the holes become apparent, Uber, and we all love it on one hand. On the other hand, you can look at why didn't Uber exist? Why do we have these highly regulated systems today? And I think there are two answers to that. Answer number one is because that's what bureaucracies do. They become self-perpetuating to a point of dubious value and questionable motivation. I mean, New York taxi medallions are worth what? Millions, because of an artificial scarcity that's created an economic system where, were they to try to disrupt it, all the medallion holders would say, I paid $1 million for this and you just made it worth nothing. So that's, on the one hand, bureaucracies perpetuate themselves. On the other hand, there's a good reason why there ought to be perhaps some regulation to see, are these people insured? Are they properly trained? Nowhere, I think London's a great example of what does it take to become a taxi driver in London? You have to have the knowledge. It takes them 3 years to get licensed, and you get in a London taxi cab, and you can give them the most obscure location or address, and they almost always know where it is.
Right,
where in New York, if you take it to the Empire State Building, they're confused.
But you have a GPS.
Yes, but that is, again, a questionable, interesting challenge. You've got a GPS, sort of. On the other hand, do we want people distracted driving?
Right.
California, among several states, actually makes illegal suction mounts on dashboards, because in an accident, those things are likely to come loose, and you're now going to, what's the last thing that went through your mind? Your phablet. We're going to have a bigger device hitting you in the face.
Right. But so when I was yesterday, you had Dreamforce in town with 145,000 people, and you had a home game for the Giants. If you wanted to get a taxi,
surge pricing.
It goes up. So what do you think about that? At the highest I've paid so far was 3.7. But I've seen the people have told me it's been over four or even 5 times.
Yeah, I was an economics major in college. I believe in supply and demand. I ultimately endorse surge pricing and find no problems with it, especially because there are other alternatives. The alternatives: take public transportation, walk. Take the regulated taxi system. As long as you're informed of what the price is going to be at the time,
they're good about that.
Yeah, they're pretty good about that.
Yeah, they even make you type the number into the search to confirm that you actually saw it.
Yeah. So I have no problems with the fact, but that's again the difference between a free market solution and a regulated solution. A regulated solution is delivering a service for the greater good, and hence the rationalization for regulated pricing and why they have to go through all of these hearings to change the pricing. It's something that's designed to deliver a quasi-municipal utility common across all experiences, and that's different from an unregulated, commercially driven service like Uber. But
But you're Dr. Disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
Disruption is this whole crowd. I mean, we've talked about this before, but is this going to change the way, is this not just a niche, but also going to change the way traditional businesses do business?
Well, I mean, when you say to justify the valuation Uber's got.
But Ford is getting into where they'll give somebody a car and have them do an Uber type service.
Yeah, well, there's a broader issue here, the sharing economy. And Uber may not be much, the only one. Zipcar is another example.
Right.
That the ownership, the number of young people who have driver's licenses now is down precipitously from years ago, because the sharing economy says not only do I not have to own a vehicle, I have pathways to connect with transportation alternatives that don't require I drive.
Why do I have to own something that I use 5% of the time?
Yeah, and let's overlay on that self-driving cars, which is, if the auto manufacturers are to be believed, we're 5 years away from having.
Or Elon Musk.
Yeah, but in general, we're 5 years away from having some credible option for self-driving cars. Yes, I think the whole transportation system is going to undergo a fundamental change from personal ownership of devices to shared services and market-driven economies and
automations.
Yeah, and the person who, I'm a car guy. I wrestle with this one because I love driving, but it also frustrates me to no end, having to deal with people on the roads who are probably better off in autonomous vehicles.
And not on their devices.
Yes.
I was driving here today, and all the traffic that I saw was due to the fact that there was one person driving 35 miles an hour, having this crazy conversation on the phone.
You're leading into pet peeves. That's a big one. Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue because I think we have quite a few pet peeves. And I don't see any kudos on here. I see a lot of pet peeves.
Yeah. I forget what I even put down. Yeah. Pet peeve number one, and this is, I think an interesting opportunity for the e-commerce economy. It's when they're watching you on their website. How many of you have experienced one of those things where you look at a product and don't buy it? And then you get an email some minutes later. I saw you were looking and didn't buy. Oh, by the way, in some number of instances like that, they offer you a lower price. They're almost discouraging me from buying now. Let me tease and look.
Well, no, you're back to haggling. It's sort of
yes.
You're back. I'm not going to take that first price. I'll walk away.
Yeah, but
you're haggling with them.
There are two approaches to this, because I've also seen it, and this is one of those ones where I've been trying to prove it for years and get others to prove it. I have a strong, strong, strong belief that there are airlines who, when you look at a ticket and don't buy, and then come back later, actually, haven't made a tariff change. They've, and yes, airline fares change all the time. But when you've come back, they're tracking you. You obviously looked around, came back here because you couldn't get a better deal. They won't offer you the same price. You get a higher price. So there are those where you don't buy, you get a higher price. There are those you don't buy, you get a lower price. And then there are those you don't buy, you just get a nag. This is one of those things where, and this has been something I've been talking about for a long time now, and believe that there's talk about a disruptive opportunity. You've played loosely in the CRM space, customer relationship management, where the notion is the vendor owns the relationship with you, and they gather all the information, and they can make informed decisions about you based on the information they have in their CRM system.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
VRM.
Absolutely. Yeah,
vendor relationship management, where I own all the information about my relationship with various vendors, put into that market information. If, for instance, I knew that this set of vendors would give me lower prices if I didn't buy right away, why don't I have that information readily available to me? Why isn't there a platform out there that does that? Staples or Office Depot is one of my favorite.
We have a new feature for, pardon my disruption. Here's a business you should do.
Yes, yes.
Entrepreneurs, here's the business. You're thinking about something, here's the business you should do.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, we'll give the ideas free. I'm sure Alan and I would be willing to consult and brainstorm. Yeah, not for free. But yes, there are a whole bunch of things. If I were a true entrepreneur, I'd be out building all of these businesses. But I'm not. I love brainstorming and let you do the work, and I'll come back in 6 months and then and dive in again. But the whole vendor relationship management. Let me get on my high horse and say that all of the platforms we've had who have sold their soul to advertising as their form of monetization have started off as things that seemed like they were champions of the users, but the old observation, if you don't know what they're selling you. And that monetization causes really bizarre behaviors that at the end of the day, they'll say they're your champion and they're trying to engender social good and all of this stuff. And yes, I think there's an element of that, but their economic survival relates to selling you, and that perverts some of the behaviors. And as a result, we don't, Staples, where I was going a moment ago.
Right.
That if you ask for a price on Staples, Staples.com, we may very well get different answers, because Staples figures out, is there an Office Depot between you and the nearest Staples location? And if there is, they think, ooh, you may be more inclined to go to the Office Depot location. I need to offer you a lower price to entice you to go the greater distance. So why isn't there a consumer platform that sits between me and Staples.com? When I know I want a price from Staples, it's got the logic in the system to go, the best way to get the price at Staples is to tell Staples my geographic location is here, wait 10 minutes after I looked for the price to get the lower price because they're going to come back, and then give me that price. And there is somebody's going to do this.
And the relationship manager.
Yeah, and so I think that whole notion of the perversion of advertising, the distribution of pricing and how you get the best deal, that right now there are very few people who are out there being real consumer champions, and I think there's a huge, huge market.
The other piece of that is
and can be monetized.
The other piece of that is your customer history. In the healthcare industry, you switch doctors. What do? You get a copy of your records, and they get shipped over to the new doctor, right?
I was going to say, I've been with the same doctor since 1988.
But the healthcare.
Tell me what it's like.
But the healthcare industry looks at your history, in terms of your interactions, and that's yours, and that goes with you from practitioner to practitioner. But that doesn't happen in the consumer space.
Right.
And you don't get any value out of what you've done before, or take it, so you don't have to spend all the time to catch them up.
Yeah, the bad news, or the good news, depending upon how you look at it. I was at a VRM conference a couple of years ago, and people from Best Buy were there just trying to, kick the tires, what it would mean to them. And I think you can actually make an argument that the sharing of information is really good for them. Because what happens now, I walk into Best Buy, I look at a product, and I want commodity-like pricing for the product. And Best Buy has no ability to go, what's your bigger picture? Can I sell you a set of products and services? Oh, you're doing a home automation thing. Here are the resources and products I can bring to bear. I'll give you a bundled price that, oh, by the way, don't buy all the products on commodity-like pricing, comparing me to whatever price you can get on the internet, because you're going to have to integrate those things yourself. I know your history. Right. I know the set of products you've got. I can overlay services.
You should be able to walk into Best Buy and say, I choose to share this history with you.
Yes.
Now let's take the conversation from here.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the thing. That's the piece I think is missing.
Yeah, and that's one of the core tenets of VRM, that I can share things with you, and in fact do so programmatically. That I can sit there and say, here are the things I'm willing to share based on the set of characteristics a vendor is willing to say. I'll protect your privacy. Ooh, if you'll do that, I will enable you to see this kind of thing. And that there are ways we can systematically share information in trusted fashion, doing it in an automated fashion, rather than I'll NFC my device, on the Best Buy kiosk that enables sharing. So I think the answer is there's a big idea here, and the question is who how's it going to come to market? Who are going to be the players that do that? And for the last couple of weeks, one of the darlings of the day, Ello.
Oh, Ello.
Yeah, Ello. And some of you may have seen.
Hands. Anybody know what Ello is? All right.
Yeah, this was the hot social network of 3 weeks ago. And what Ello offered was some of what do you hate about Facebook? They're selling everything to you. They're interjecting more of their editorial judgment into your feed. Right. How about something simple and clean and user friendly? And for a while, everybody was on Ello, and everybody was talking about Ello.
And it has that viral. You have to get invited by somebody.
Yeah. And how long did that last?
I'm done. I don't know. I haven't been back.
Yeah, I got my invite and didn't even sign up because I knew it's like, I've seen this before.
To see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it also suffers from what you talked about. The initial user experience is so poor.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem is, the initial, if everybody could simultaneously migrate everything they had with all of their network connections onto a new platform and be up and running in hours and days, it could work. But we've invested so much in building our connections on Facebook and our likes and this and that and the other thing, and that kind of experience is not easily replicated. It's not just the platform, but it's the platform and connections, and so but I think the on the one hand, the unfortunate thing, and we'll see. I'm not prepared to write them off because, as I said, I think there is an opportunity for a platform that champions user requirements and delivers a set of capabilities and functions that are VRM-like, that aren't totally advertising driven. In fact, may not have advertising as any particular.
Can a platform make it as a purely subscription platform?
I didn't say subscription's the business model either.
What would be the monetization strategy that you think could work there besides?
I'll capture a piece of the value. If I can get you a lower price on a product that you buy, will you share some of that lower price with me?
Right.
That these things are increasingly prevalent in the enterprise space. The big consulting projects are going in on a shared risk, shared return thing. It used to be fixed price. You paid for a set of services. Now, the service providers on the one hand are saying, wow, we went and did a small engagement and saved those guys billions. We left money on the table. At the same time, the buyers are sitting there going, you came in, you promised me all these benefits. I paid for them and got none of them. Here I am 3 years into an SAP engagement and I've seen nothing but pain. So I think there's demand on both sides to find an equitable model. I see no reason why that won't work in the consumer space as well. That we have a share, that you'd be willing, if I can legitimately save you money, it makes sense for you to give up a little bit of that to me.
Absolutely. All right, we have a shame on you this week that you absolutely have to share.
Yeah.
This was
Marriott hotel chain. Boo hiss. Got fined. $500,000 by the FCC. One of the enduring curiosities in life is if you go to a low-priced hotel, Wi-Fi is free. If you go to a high-priced hotel, they charge you $15 a day for internet.
$15 a day.
Yeah, I know.
That's like more than a car payment.
Yeah, that's and it's crappy internet too.
Right.
In many instances now, it brings back terrible memories of 2400 baud modems. You can see screens repaint themselves. So they're charging a lot of money for crappy internet, but somewhere the Gaylord Hotel in Nashville decided not enough customers of theirs were paying for the crappy internet, that they had all these fancy cell phones that had hotspot characteristics. So what did the Gaylord do? They went and blew up people's Wi-Fi, hotspot connections. They went in and interfered with the cellular connections so you couldn't use your Wi-Fi hotspot to connect and had to pay for their crappy internet. Chutzpah to the nth degree, and thankfully, the FCC finally got something right and charged these guys $500,000. The Gaylord's actually a Marriott property, and Marriott's gotten a lot of the bad press. It was this single property, and there's a side of me that if it was a rogue property doing it, shame on them. If this was Marriott's like, let's test it, see if it works.
Right.
And if it works, let's do it more places because we can make more money. They definitely belong in the Hall of Shame. But either way, imagine the chutzpah. Not enough people are using our crappy internet. How
right.
Improving the service? Boy, that would be expensive and require infrastructure and investment. Let's just buy this box of jams or signals.
That's awesome.
Just on the hotels front, is the U.S. trying to stop Waldorf from being bought by the Chinese because the Chinese might spy
Well, yeah,
They actually believe that Waldorf's not already spying them.
yeah. Well, the question was the Waldorf Astoria is up for, at least I guess there's a purchase offer. I don't know if the deal's closed, but they're going to be, acquired by the Chinese. And the question is, did the U.S. try and stop it because of risks of spying? I think I don't know whether that's the case, but the broader issue is, this has been the place where U.S. presidents typically stay when they come to New York, and there's a question of, does it make sense for them to stay there? There's a side of me that says, that makes good political grandstanding. If we don't think that these things, that foreign sources have other ways of infiltrating those infrastructures, whether it's they stay there themselves, they've invested in the infrastructure players, that their workers are actually working on renovations of all of these places. I think that makes great political sense.
I'm going to cut you off, and we're going to have to continue the conversation after the show. This is Alan Berkson. I'm here with Jonathan Yarmis. We come here every,
second Friday.
The second Friday of every month normally, except for the last 2 months, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, well, Mazel Tov on the B'nai Mitzvah, your girls.
Thank you. That's why we didn't have it last week.
Yeah.
We're here the second Friday of every month, and we talk about, if you have any topics that you'd like us to discuss, feel free to tweet at us. I'm at Berkson0, at JYarmis. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.